An F-35 pilot takes off in the middle of the night for a long-range mission toward Iran. By the time he returns, he may have been flying for 8, sometimes even 10 hours without landing. Inside the jet, there is no bathroom, no room to stand, and no way to stretch your legs. Just one pilot, strapped into a cockpit barely larger than a car seat, flying a stealth fighter at nearly 1,200 miles per hour. So, how does an F-35 pilot eat, drink, and even use the bathroom during a mission this long? A typical operation often begins in the middle of the night. The pilot walks across the runway toward a jet worth more than $80 million, already fueled, armed, and waiting under floodlights. After climbing into the cockpit, the canopy closes above him, and from that moment on, he's essentially locked inside a flying machine built for speed, stealth, and combat. Within minutes, the engines roar to full power. The F-35 accelerates down the runway and launches into the darkness. At first, the flight might feel routine. The aircraft climbs to altitude and begins the long journey toward the mission area. But the distance involved in operations near Iran can be enormous. Targets could be hundreds of miles away, sometimes even further. That means that the pilot may spend hours simply flying toward the region before anything happens. And this is where the real challenge begins. Unlike a passenger aircraft, a fighter jet cockpit is extremely tight. The pilot is strapped into an ejection seat with multiple harnesses, wearing a flight suit, survival gear, a heavy helmet, and a tight G-suit designed to keep blood flowing during high G maneuvers. Movement is limited, stretching is impossible, and the pilot has to stay alert the entire time. Because once the aircraft approaches hostile airspace, the situation can change very quickly. Enemy radar systems may already be searching the sky. Surface-to-air missiles could be waiting. Other aircraft might be nearby. The F-35 is designed for exactly these kinds of environments. Its stealth shape and internal weapons bays help it to avoid detection while gathering information about everything happening in the air and on the ground. But even with all that technology, the mission still depends on a single person sitting in that cramped cockpit. And that person could be flying for most of the night. Which raises a strange, but very real question. If a pilot is stuck inside a fighter jet for 8 hours or more, how do they actually survive the flight? How do they drink water, eat food, and stay focused long enough to complete the mission? Because life inside that cockpit is far more uncomfortable than most people even imagine. And to understand how pilots deal with that, we have to first look at what the cockpit of an F-35 is really like. From the outside, the aircraft looks large and powerful. But once the pilot climbs inside, the available space becomes surprisingly small. The cockpit itself is built around a single ejection seat. Everything else in the aircraft is designed around that one position. The pilot sits slightly reclined with legs extended forward and arms resting near the control stick and throttle. Once the harnesses are tightened, movement becomes very limited. 8 different straps secure the pilot to the seat. These straps are not there just for comfort, they're designed to keep the body stable during extreme maneuvers and, if necessary, during an emergency ejection from the aircraft. The seat itself contains a powerful rocket system. If the pilot pulls the ejection handle, the entire seat is blasted out of the aircraft in the fraction of a second. After that, a parachute deploys automatically. It is an incredible piece of engineering, but it also means the cockpit must remain compact. In front of the pilot sits a large panoramic touchscreen display. Instead of dozens of traditional gauges, the F-35 shows most of the information on this single digital screen. Speed, altitude, fuel levels, weapon status, sensor data, all of it appears in one place. But the most impressive system isn't on the dashboard, it's on the pilot's head. The F-35 helmet is one of the most advanced pieces of equipment ever worn in combat aviation. Each helmet costs roughly $400,000 and acts like a flying command center. When the pilot looks around, the visor displays targeting information, navigation data, and even night vision. Cameras mounted around the aircraft send video directly to the helmet display. This allows the pilot to do something that sounds almost impossible. He can actually look through the aircraft. By looking down, the pilot can see the ground beneath the jet as if the floor were transparent. All of this technology helps the pilot stay aware of everything happening around the aircraft. But comfort was never the main priority when this cockpit was designed. The pilot still wears a heavy helmet, an oxygen mask connected to the life support system, and a tight G-suit that inflates during sharp turns. When the aircraft pulls high Gs, the suit squeezes the pilot's legs and abdomen to keep blood from rushing away from the brain. Without it, a pilot would black out during combat maneuvers. So imagine sitting in that seat for hours, strapped in, helmet on, oxygen mask on your face, barely able to move. Now let's add another challenge to that. Sooner or later, every pilot gets hungry. And that creates a very unusual problem inside a fighter jet. After several hours in the air, even the most focused pilot will start to feel it. Hunger. A long mission demands concentration the entire time. The brain is constantly processing information, navigation, radio calls, fuel levels, sensor data, and possible threats. That kind of workload burns a surprising amount of energy, so pilots need to eat. But eating inside of a fighter jet is nothing like eating inside of a normal aircraft. There's no tray table, there's no room to place food, and the pilot is still wearing gloves, a helmet, and an oxygen mask. Everything has to be simple. Before long missions, a pilot will usually pack a few small snacks into the cockpit. Most of the time, these are like protein bars, energy bars, or compact high-calorie snacks. They're easy to store and easy to eat with one hand. But there is one important rule when choosing food for a fighter jet. No crumbs. Crumbs might sound harmless, but inside a cockpit filled with those sensitive electronics, they can become a real problem. That's why a pilot will avoid foods like crackers or cookies. Instead, they choose food that will stay in one piece. Energy bars are perfect for that. They're compact, dense, and provide quick energy without creating a mess. When a pilot wants to take a bite, he briefly lifts the oxygen mask away from his mouth, and it takes only a few seconds. Then the mask goes back on. Drinking is a little bit easier. Most pilots carry a hydration system similar to a Camelback water bag. A small tube runs from the bag forward to the helmet, allowing the pilot to drink without removing equipment. Some aircraft also have water bottles stored inside of pockets of the flight gear. This allows pilots to stay hydrated during extremely long missions, because dehydration can become a serious problem at high altitude. Even inside a pressurized cockpit, the air is very dry. Over several hours, that dryness can cause fatigue, headaches, and slower reaction times, so pilots take small sips regularly throughout the whole flight. Still, eating and drinking are only minor challenges compared to the next problem, because eventually, during a mission that lasts 8 or 9 hours, another issue becomes unavoidable. At some point, the pilot might need to use the bathroom. And inside a fighter jet flying at nearly 1,200 miles per hour, that is not a simple situation. Before we talk about how pilots deal with that problem, let me ask you something. Could you sit in a fighter cockpit for 8 hours with nothing but energy bars and water? Because for many pilots, that's exactly what these missions look like. Sooner or later, during a long mission, nature starts to call. And inside a fighter jet, that can become a serious problem. Because unlike larger aircraft, the F-35 has no toilet at all. There's just no place for it. So what happens if a pilot needs to go to the bathroom while flying at 35,000 feet? The answer is something called a piddle pack. It may sound strange, but this small device has been standard equipment for fighter pilots for decades. A piddle pack is essentially a specialized plastic bag. Inside the bag is a powder made from absorbent chemicals. When liquid enters the bag, the powder immediately turns it into a thick gel. This prevents the liquid from spilling or leaking inside the cockpit. The pilot can then seal the bag and store it safely until the mission is over. But before the mission can continue, there is another critical step. The aircraft will need more fuel. And that means performing one of the most delicate maneuvers in military aviation, refueling in midair. Flying a stealth fighter toward Iran and back would be impossible on a single tank of fuel. Even though the F-35 carries a large internal fuel load, long-range missions quickly push the limits of how far the aircraft can travel. That is where aerial refueling becomes essential. Somewhere along the route, often hundreds of miles from the launch base, a tanker aircraft was already waiting in the sky. These aircraft are like flying gas stations. Large tankers such as the KC-135 Stratotanker or the newer KC-46 Pegasus can carry enormous amounts of fuel and transfer it to other aircraft during flight. For the F-35 pilot, the process requires precision and patience. The fighter slowly approaches the tanker from behind. Both aircraft are flying at high altitude and hundreds of miles per hour. From the cockpit, the pilot carefully lines up with the tanker's refueling boom. This boom is a long, rigid tube controlled by a boom operator inside the tanker aircraft. So once the F-35 is in position, the operator guides the boom towards a small receptacle located on the fighter's back. Then, the connection is made, and fuel begins flowing into the aircraft. Even though this maneuver sounds simple, it demands incredible control. The fighter pilot has to hold position just a few meters behind the tanker while both aircraft move through the sky at high speed. If the pilot drifts too close, the aircraft could collide. If the jet moves too far away, the connection breaks. And sometimes these refueling operations happen in total darkness. During night missions, pilots rely on formation lights and instruments to maintain their position. The entire process usually only takes a few minutes, but those minutes can determine whether the mission succeeds or fails. Once the tanks are full again, the boom disconnects and the fighter moves away. Now the aircraft has enough fuel to continue the mission. It might head deeper toward its target area or remain in the region for hours while monitoring enemy activity. This is one of the reasons modern stealth operations can last so long. A single F-35 may refuel multiple times during one mission. Each refueling adds more hours to the flight, and every additional hour means the pilot has to stay alert, focused, and ready. Because the aircraft is not just flying through hostile airspace, it is also carrying weapons designed for some of the most precise strikes in modern warfare. And those weapons are stored inside one of the most important features of the F-35, its internal stealth weapons bay. By the time the F-35 approaches its mission area near Iran, the aircraft is not just carrying fuel and sensors, it is also carrying weapons. But unlike older fighter jets, most of these weapons are hidden inside the aircraft. This is one of the key reasons the F-35 is so difficult to detect. Under the belly of the jet are internal weapons bays. These compartments allow the aircraft to carry missiles and bombs without mounting them on external pylons. External weapons create radar reflections. Internal weapons help the aircraft stay stealthy. When the mission requires it, the bay doors open only for a few seconds. The weapon releases and the doors close again almost immediately. From radar's perspective, the aircraft remains extremely difficult to track. A common stealth combat load for the F-35 includes 2 AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles. These missiles are designed for air-to-air combat. They can track and intercept enemy aircraft from long distances using active radar guidance. If another aircraft appears in the area, the pilot can engage it without ever getting close enough for a dogfight. Alongside those missiles, the aircraft may carry 2 GBU-31 JDAM bombs. Each of these bombs weighs around 2,000 pounds. Instead of relying on laser guidance, JDAM bombs use satellite navigation to guide themselves toward the target. Once released, the weapon adjusts its flight path using small control fins. This allows the bomb to strike a target with remarkable accuracy, even from high altitude. But missiles and bombs are not the only weapons on board. The F-35 also carries an internal 25mm GAU-22A cannon. This cannon fires explosive rounds at extremely high speed. In just a few seconds, it can unleash a stream of shells capable of destroying ground targets or enemy aircraft at close range. Altogether, the aircraft can carry thousands of kilograms of weapons depending on how the mission is configured. Yet what makes the F-35 truly powerful is not just its firepower. It is the technology that helps the pilot see, track, and understand everything happening around the battlefield. Because inside that cockpit, the pilot is not just flying a fighter jet, he is operating something closer to a flying intelligence system. And that technology is what allows one pilot to control so much information during missions that can last nearly an entire night. By this point in the mission, the pilot may have already been flying for several hours. Fatigue slowly builds. The body starts to feel the pressure of sitting in the same position for so long. But the aircraft is helping the pilot manage something even more difficult: information. Modern air combat produces an enormous amount of data. Radar signals, electronic emissions, aircraft positions, ground threats, and communications are constantly flowing through the battle space. Older fighter jets forced pilots to interpret all of this using many different displays. That could quickly become overwhelming. The F-35 was designed to solve that problem. Instead of showing raw information from multiple sensors, the aircraft combines everything into a single, clear picture. This is called sensor fusion. The jet gathers information from its radar, electronic warfare systems, cameras, satellites, and even other aircraft. Then, the onboard computers process that information and present it to the pilot in a simple, understandable way. Instead of sorting through dozens of signals, the pilot sees a clean map of the battlefield. Friendly aircraft appear clearly, potential threats are highlighted, targets are identified and tracked automatically. All of this information is displayed on a large panoramic screen in front of the pilot. But the most remarkable display is still inside the helmet. The F-35 helmet-mounted display system replaces many traditional cockpit instruments. Wherever the pilot looks, important data appears directly on that visor. Altitude, speed, target information, navigation cues, night vision imagery. It's almost like having a heads-up display that follows the pilot's eyes. But the system can do something even more impressive. Cameras mounted around the aircraft feed live video into the helmet. These cameras form what is called the distributed aperture system, giving the pilot a full 360-degree view around the aircraft. If the pilot looks down, the helmet shows the ground below the jet. It creates the illusion that the aircraft's body is transparent. This kind of awareness becomes extremely valuable during complex missions, because after hours in the air, the pilot may still need to react instantly to new threats. And thanks to all this technology, the one person inside that cramped cockpit can control the aircraft that is constantly watching the entire battlefield. But after flying for most of the night, the mission is finally coming to an end. And when the F-35 turns back toward base, the pilot has likely been sitting in that seat for longer than many people spend at work in a full day. Flying in an F-35 is not just about speed or stealth, it's about endurance. A long mission toward Iran can keep a pilot inside the cockpit for 8 hours or more without ever touching the ground. During that time, the pilot may refuel multiple times, monitor enemy air defenses, communicate with other aircraft, and stay ready to launch weapons at any moment, all while sitting inside a cockpit barely larger than a car seat. There's no room to walk around, no place to stretch, and definitely no bathroom. Instead, the pilots rely on energy bars, hydration systems, and some very unusual solutions just to get through the flight. It's a small reminder that behind all of the advanced technology today, there is still a human being doing the job. A person who has to stay focused for hours while flying one of the most complex aircraft ever built. So the next time you see an F-35 streaking across the sky, remember this. Inside that cockpit might be a pilot who has already been flying for most of the night, living on an energy bar and hoping his piddle pack doesn't leak. Now, before we end, I'm curious about one thing. Do you think you can handle sitting inside that cockpit for 8 hours or more straight? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Let's keep sharing these stories. If you value real stories like this video and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.